Let's talk about confidence, Season 2, Episode 7. Why high performers struggle with confidence. Welcome to Let's Talk About Confidence. I'm John M. Walsh. I want to start today with a question that sounds like it shouldn't be a question at all. Why would a high performer struggle with confidence? Doesn't make sense on the surface, does it? These are the people getting results, delivering to deadlines, leading teams, being promoted. They're the ones others point to and say, there goes someone who has it together. And yet, some of the most capable people I've worked with, people with exceptional track records, serious technical expertise, decades of experience behind them, carry a private uncertainty that their performance has never quite managed to silence. On the outside, competence. On the inside, a quiet voice asking, when will they realise I'm not as good as I think? Today I want to explain why. Because once you understand the mechanism, the whole thing stops feeling like a personal feeling and starts making complete psychological sense. This isn't a feel-good episode, it's a diagnostic one, so stay with me. Here's the first thing you need to understand about high performers and confidence. Achievement and confidence are not the same thing. They're not even on the same spectrum. We've been conditioned to believe they are. The logic goes, perform well, get results, feel more confident, repeat. But that's not how the brain works. What the brain actually does is recalibrate. Every time a high performer reaches a new level, the brain doesn't pause to say, well done, look how far you've come. It does something far less generous. It resets the baseline. The new level becomes a new normal. And a normal, by definition, carries no particular sense of achievement. Neuroscience here is fascinating. It's called hedonic adaptation, the brain's tendency to return to a set emotional baseline regardless of positive or negative changes in circumstances. It's the same mechanism that explains why people who experience dramatic life improvements often report returning to their pre-change happiness levels within a year or two. The joy fades because the brain adjusts. For high performers, this plays out constantly. The project they were terrified of, they delivered it. The presentation that had them up to 3 a.m, it went well. But instead of storing that as evidence of capability, the brain files it under normal. It's expected. It's what you do. So the next challenge arrives and the confidence account hasn't grown. It's been quietly reset. Let me give you an example of how this plays out. I worked as a senior leader, let's call her Sarah, who'd just been promoted to director level after delivering a transformation programme that saved her organisation millions. On paper, she should have been walking into the new role with confidence. Instead, she told me she felt like a fraud. When I asked her to list her achievements over the past 3 years, she struggled. Not because there weren't any, there were plenty, but because each one, once completed, had been immediately filed as done and replaced by the next challenge. The transformation programme that should have been evidence of exceptional capability had become, in her mind, just something that happened, nothing special. That's hedonic adaptation in action. The brain consuming achievement without storing its confidence. Now layer on top of that a second dynamic, the environment high performers operate in. The higher you go, the more visible you become. And the more visible you become, the louder the inner critic tends to get. There's a reason for this too. It's not weakness, it's neurology. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for self-evaluation and forward planning, is extraordinarily active in high-achieving people. It's one of the reasons they perform well. They anticipate. They stress test ideas before speaking. They consider failure modes before committing. But that same hyperactive self-assessment runs in both directions. It doesn't only evaluate your plans, it evaluates you. The experience that follows, the sense that you might be found out, that your success has been part circumstance, part luck, part timing. It has a name. You'll know it. It's called imposter syndrome. Research by psychologists Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes, who first named this phenomenon in the late 70s, found it was particularly prevalent among high-achieving women. But subsequent research has shown it affects around 70% of people across all demographics at some point in their careers. 70%. Which means if you've ever sat in a meeting feeling like everyone else knows something you don't, or achieved something significant and immediately wondered when someone would notice it was a fluke, you're in very good company. The imposter mechanism is almost a feature of capable minds. It's not a bug. Here's what makes this particularly cruel. The people most likely to experience imposter syndrome are often the ones least likely to talk about it. High performers have built identities around competence. Admitting uncertainty feels like a threat to their identity. So they stay silent, they assume everyone else hasn't figured it out yet, and carry the private weight alone. Meanwhile, everyone else in the room is doing exactly the same. Here's where it gets particularly interesting, and for some of you particularly frustrating. You might have thought, consciously or otherwise, that once you achieved enough, the doubt would stop. Get the promotion, land the client, deliver the project. Surely at some point the evidence accumulates to the point where confidence becomes automatic. It doesn't. And the reason is that confidence built purely on outcomes is structurally fragile. It depends on the next result going well. It's performance contingent, which means on any given day, in any high-stakes situation, it's available to collapse. Think about the difference between two kinds of foundations. One is built on what you've done. The other is built on who you are in the process of doing it. The first is always one bad result away from crumbling. The second holds when the results go sideways. High performers almost universally build the first kind. It's understandable. They've been rewarded for results their entire career, school, university, early professional life. Every reinforcement mechanism pointed at the outcome, not the process. So they become extraordinarily good at producing results and extraordinarily dependent on those results for their sense of worth. Which means failure, or even the possibility of failure, doesn't just threaten the project, it threatens the identity. This is why high performers can appear confident in their area of expertise but fall apart when they step into unfamiliar territory. The confidence wasn't internal, it was borrowed from past results. And in new territory, there are no past results to borrow from. There's a third dynamic worth naming. I call it the visibility trap. As competence increases, so does scrutiny. More people watching, more people with expectations, more people who will notice if things go wrong. The brain registers this as a threat. Not a metaphorical threat, a neurological one. The amygdala, your brain's threat detection centre, doesn't distinguish very well between physical danger and social danger. Being embarrassed in front of your peers activates very similar threat responses to encountering something physically risky. The heart rate increases, cortisol rises, the body prepares to protect itself. For a high performer operating under scrutiny, this means that the same brain that drives exceptional performance is also working against it. The more visible the stakes, the louder the alarm bells. And here's the particular cruelty. High performers rarely show this. They've learned often, very early in life, to perform competence even when they don't feel it. So the outside world sees someone in control, their inside world is considerably noisier. That gap between the presented self and the experienced self is exhausting to maintain. And it's one of the reasons high performers can be more susceptible to burnout than their outwardly less polished colleagues. They're running two performances simultaneously. I remember a client, he was a senior partner at a professional services firm, who described it perfectly. He said, I feel like I'm on stage all the time, even in meetings with my own team. There's never a moment where I'm not managing how I come across. That's the visibility trap. The higher you climb, the more you feel watched. And the more you feel watched, the more energy goes into performance management rather than actual performance. I want to be clear about something. I'm not asking you to lower your standards, stop caring about performance, or adopt a relaxed attitude to results. That's not what this is about. What I'm saying is that confidence you've been building, outcome dependent, performance contingent, externally validated, is the wrong architecture. Not because it hasn't worked so far, it clearly has, but because it has a ceiling and because it costs more to maintain than it should. So what's the alternative? The first shift is from outcome confidence to process confidence. This means deliberately logging, actually writing down, not just what you achieved, but how you navigated it, the decision you made under pressure, the conversation you handled when it got difficult, the moment you recovered when something went wrong. The brain doesn't naturally store data that well. It's wired for threat detection and novelty. It notices what went wrong far more readily than it registers what you handled competently. So the logging isn't sentimental, it's corrective. It's building an evidence base the brain would otherwise leave out. Try this. At the end of each week, write down 3 moments where you navigated something competently. Not 3 wins, 3 moments of capable navigation. Now notice the difference. A win's an outcome. Navigation is a process. You can navigate competently and still not get the outcome you wanted. Now that's worth recording. The second shift is separating self-worth from performance. This is harder. It takes longer. But the starting point is just noticing, when you've collapsed the two, when a difficult meeting becomes evidence of your inadequacy, when a piece of critical feedback feels like an identity verdict rather than information about a piece of work. A useful question to ask yourself is, if someone I respected had this experience, would I conclude they were inadequate? Or would I see it as a difficult moment that they'll learn from? We extend that grace to others far more readily than we extend it to ourselves. That asymmetry is worth examining. The third shift is learning to tolerate visibility without translating it into threat. This is what I sometimes call performing under observation. The ability to function at your best when others are watching without the amygdala hijacking the prefrontal cortex in the process. That's a skill that can be trained, and it starts with deliberately putting yourself in low-stakes visible situations so the brain learns, slowly, through repetition, that visibility isn't a danger. If high-stakes presentations terrify you, start by speaking up more in internal meetings. If client meetings feel like performance, practice with trusted colleagues first. Give your nervous system evidence that being watched doesn't mean being harmed. The brain learns safety through repeated exposure. You can't think your way out of the visibility trap. You have to experience your way out of it. Let me offer one more reframe before we close. High performers often have an adversarial relationship with their own achievement. They use it as a weapon against themselves. I did well last time, so I should do well this time. If I don't, something's wrong with me. That's not motivation. That's a setup for perpetual inadequacy. What if achievement was simply information? I've done this before. That's useful data. Doesn't guarantee I'll do it again, but it's one factor among many. That might sound like lowering the bar. It isn't. It's recognising that confidence doesn't come from certainty about outcomes. It comes from trust in your ability to navigate whatever happens, including failure. The most genuinely confident high performers I've worked with aren't the ones who expect to succeed every time. They're the ones who know they can handle it if they don't. That's a completely different relationship with performance, and it's considerably more sustainable. Here's what I'd like you to take from today. High performers struggle with confidence not because they're not good enough. They struggle because they've built their confidence on the most fragile possible foundation, external results, while their brains quietly work overtime, assessing every gap between expectation and reality. It's not a character flaw, it's a structural problem. And structural problems have structural solutions. Start small. This week, write down 3 moments where you navigated something competently. Not 3 wins, 3 moments of capable navigation. And notice the difference. And if you've been carrying imposter syndrome in silence, wondering why everyone else seems to have figured it out, now you know they don't. 70% of them are carrying the same thing. The only difference is whether you talk about it. You've earned the right to trust yourself a little more than you currently do. I'm John M. Walsh. This is Let's Talk About Confidence. I'll see you in the next episode.